All right, welcome back to DTR's YouTube channel. I'd like to start off by saying thanks to all our new subscribers, as well as all our current subscribers. You all are really helping the channel grow, and we really do appreciate it. All right, welcome back to DTR's YouTube channel. All right, moving along with our 66 Impala project. As you can see, all the front end sheet metal I've removed, which I'm gonna, in the process of stripping this body, I'm just gonna send that out to my sandblaster and have him just strip the panels inside and out with the sandblaster. The remaining part of the body that's here, the trunk lid and the hood and what you see here, I'm just going to be stripping by hand and prepping different panels in different ways. The beginning of this project was intended to be to just repair the paint where it needed repairs, block it all out real good, and then re-clear it and hopefully, you know, block the clear and get this car looking the way it's supposed to look. It's really wavy right now, and the customer wants it much nicer, and I mentioned that in the earlier videos, but one of the changes I've decided to make is to paint the insides of the door jambs, the underside of the trunk lid, because they're just, if the outside is going to look as good as I'm going to make it look, the insides of these panels are going to look terrible. Plus, at one point, I'm going to actually remove the doors and do a paint job on this car like I do on every project here, is, you know, paint the jambs and the quarters all at once, because the jambs, again, they look like they were painted with a spray can. They weren't, but they're just full of dirt and flaws and such. And again, like where the door has been hitting the jamb, I'll clean that all up and get that looking much nicer. So it's going a little further than what we originally anticipated, but the customer agrees he wants this car as good as I can make it. So these are the extra steps I'm going to have to take on the project. But as far as the sandblasting process goes, I don't like to have hoods and deck lids, panels that have big surface areas. I don't like to sandblast them with the risk of accidentally warping them. So I don't take that chance, and I just strip them by hand. What I'm going to start with today is getting this door aligned better, to see if I can get it aligned better, I should say. The door is almost lined up to the rocker like it's supposed to be. In most cars, when you're hanging a door, the front edge of the door and the front front edge of the rocker panel usually line up perfect, and that tells you where the door is supposed to be on the car. These are pretty close, but I think I need to move this one a little further front that way, because we really have a tight gap here, and he's always had a problem with the window alignment, which I've said in the earlier video. But this door is also hanging really bad because the front lower hinge pin is a little worn out, which is causing this to hang, and the way the door was aligned, it wasn't aligned to accommodate that problem. Now, most likely I'm going to replace the pin or so it doesn't have any slop in it, or we may just find, customer may even have one, a new lower hinge for the door. But for the sake of what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loosen the hinges and align this door using what I have, because again, sometimes that's all you got or what have you, and you just need to make something work. So you have to, as I said, you got to kind of trick the door into not knowing that the pin is bad. So instead of having a door that, you know, falls, you have to essentially adjust the door higher so that it has, you know, basically fallen, or is in the fallen position, but it's still adjusted up high enough that it's going to line up and close correctly. So that's what one of the things I'm going to start with in this video. Okay, so got my socket for my hinges. I got my bottle jack, which I'm going to use to help lift the door up and down. Again, doing this myself, and also trying to show the viewer out there that this job doesn't need two people. You know, this in essence as well, when you're using a bottle jack, you can control what you're lifting up and down, as opposed to getting somebody to hold it in place and, you know, not roach around and move. I mean, these doors are heavy as well, so, you know, take advantage of something like a bottle jack to do the heavy lifting for you. But I need a block to put my jack under because it isn't high enough. Okay, I got my block. So I'm gonna start by, sorry if you can't see this part of it, but all I'm doing is putting the door, or putting the jack underneath the bottom edge of the door, and I'm just going to start jacking up very slightly, and you can maybe see the door is already moving, and now it's kind of stopped. And basically what I just did was I took all the slop that's in the pin and I'm essentially lifting it up. Now if I let this down, the door is going to hang because the pin is messed up. So this is where you can trick the door into not realizing that the pin is shot. So now that I got this held here, I'm going to loosen the bolts on the jamb, I should say on the pillar, so that I can adjust the door up accordingly. Now, when it comes to adjustment on doors, the bolts on most cars, the bolts on the pillar to the hinge control up and down and front and back. The bolts on the hinge going into the door control the rotation of the door in relationship to the quarter panel, because you adjust the door to the quarter panel. You don't adjust the door to the fender or so on. You know, it's a foundation. The quarter panel is the foundation, and then you build front off of that. So these will control your in and out adjustments. But for now, all I'm concerned with is getting this door up this way. So, as well as I want to get the door front, but you don't want to just loosen all the bolts all at once and the thing falls. You kind of want to, you have it somewhat in place, and you can work off what you have now and just do one motion at a time to get the door to move the direction you want to move it. So I want this door to go front and up in the back. So I'm going to start by leaving the bottom front bolt tight and loosening everything else up, using that bottom bolt as a pivot for the door to pivot up on. But first thing I'm going to do, make sure it's tight, and it is. Now I'm going to loosen all the others. I should have loosened these before, because these are really tight. I also have put a piece of tape over the hinges. I should show you this so you all understand what I'm talking about. Okay, I put this piece of tape on each hinge because that tells me where I'm at, where I'm starting. So now any adjustment I make, that change is going to show in the tape. This piece of tape will move in conjunction, in relationship to that, and you kind of know where you're going. Plus, if you have a gap back here that you have to gain or lose a certain measurement, whether it's 1/16 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, well, you can't see the back of the door and the front of the door at the same time, so you just use that as a gauge to know, did I move a 1/16? Did I move an 1/8? Just a stupid little trick. Again, when you can't have eyes on both ends, those are the kind of things you gotta do. So, like I said, we're gonna start with loosening all the bolts, leaving this one tight, and using that basically as a pivot or a hinge for the door to rotate on. I apologize to anybody watching this video. Who's waiting for the part where one guy comes out and slaps another guy in the face. I think there's enough of that on YouTube right now, so I'll stick to trying to teach you something more meaningful instead. So now we're all tight, and now things go the way they should. I should jack up on my jack, which is going to move this hinge front, which is going to do two things. It's going to get my back up, and it's going to get me more forward than what I need to be. So let's do that. Start jacking. And now I'm already higher. I'm already higher than the quarter panel. And my tape has moved. I wish I could show you both of these things at the same time. My tape has moved from its home position probably 1/8 of an inch, which might be too much. And I've already discovered another problem with this project and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I've adjusted the door, which made the hinge move, which now I can see a spot where the hinge used to be, and underneath that hinge there's no paint. It's bare metal. There's different, I don't want to get off topic here, but there's different rules people use when it comes to doing overall paint jobs. Some guys will paint cars apart like we do here. Some guys want to paint them all together. And there's different reasons people do what they do, and I don't care what anybody does. They can do whatever they want. What I like to do is I like to get paint on everything and then put a car together. And it does present the issue of, now you're putting something together. Well, it presents the issue of making sure that every panel is going to be painted exactly the same, which is a challenge in itself. But it can be done, and we've been doing it that way for years and haven't had any issues doing that. But putting painted parts together without the risk of damaging an edge or what have you. But the point I'm trying to make here is, now that this is painted, or this car was painted together, it shows that it was painted together, because underneath the hinge where I just adjusted it, there's bare metal, there's no paint, and in time, what's going to happen is that bare metal spot, with the moisture in the air and so on and so forth, especially in Pennsylvania here where we get a lot of humidity, that'll start to rust. It'll start to rust, and then the rust will bleed out from behind the hinge all over the car. Now, if you've done that on your entire job, you're going to have rust spots all over your car because of those kind of things. I took the trim off of around where the convertible top is, and the clips to help snap the trim on, they were painted over, which is fine. But when I took the clip off, which I've done now, there was no paint under the clip. It was all bare metal. So again, in time, those bare spots are going to bleed rust onto the nice part of the paint, and you're going to think you have rust happening, and here your paint is getting stained because those kind of things were done that way. And you got to learn these things. The average do-it-yourselfer might not think of all that, but that's kind of the point of making these videos. So anyway, back to where I was at. My hinge now moved forward. So now, just like what I did in the beginning, I'm going to tighten my top front hinge bolt, and I'm going to use that as the pivot for lowering the door back down. Lowering the door back down, as well as the door will then rotate front at the bottom. But I raised the door higher than what I need it to be, because when I loosen this, the lower hinge, it's going to roll forward and go back down, and I want to lower it till the point where it's level with the quarter panel edge. So that's tight now. So now I can loosen this guy. And again, while I'm doing all this, and I have the door sitting on the jack, the hinge pin is at the point where it can't fall. So once I get this door adjusted, you may be able to go over to the door and pick up on it, but it's going to be hanging at the point where the hinge pin is worn at. So your door will still work correctly. Okay, so that is loose. Tape is there. Make sure that one's loose. Now we're going to come back over. Going to loosen the jack. Get it. Oh, it's just a fuzz. Might be just, yeah, that might be pretty good. I'm going to leave it right there. Okay. don't seem like we moved a lot, but I'm going to tighten it anyway. It's moved a little bit, but I think the top moved more than the bottom to get us where we need to be because it was hanging so bad. So I'm going to loosen this. Now the door didn't drop anymore. And now, yeah, we need to go. Now the other thing I will show you is all, but now I've got a beautiful parallel gap here, as opposed to what it was, where there was almost touching. And I've been able to maintain this. I mean, I still have a little bit of room here. I could even go front if I wanted to. And no, I think I'm going to leave it right where it's at. But I still have what feels like a little bit of a bind when the door gets close to being shut. And the weather strip, that's another thing. I pulled the weather strip off the door. The striker is not there. The latch is still in the door, but the striker's off, because that's another thing when you're adjusting a door is you can't adjust the door with weather strip on, and you can't adjust the door with a striker on, because it's always going to go where the striker tells it to go. You want the door to be hanging freely, so that's where it's going to go. And then once it's time to put the striker on, you say, okay, this is the point where you belong, because this is where the door is going to land. So now what I need to look at is my door parallel with the quarter. So basically what you want to try and find is, where does the door meet the quarter first? Does it meet it at this point first, or does it meet it at the bottom first? Because if it meets it at the top first, if it would meet it at the top first and the door is sticking out, then you want to loosen your bolts down here and do the same method where you leave one bolt tight, which is going to hold it in place, and you use it as a pivot. Now, one other thing on that method is, if you're doing it that you have to move the top and rotate it on the bottom bolt, what's going to happen when you loosen the bolts is the door is going to fall. So you kind of also want to use the jack in conjunction with doing that, so the door doesn't fall, and you can maintain where the door is to make your adjustment. This is all coming pretty fast. I understand that, but when you start doing it, you'll kind of understand exactly what I mean. So let's see here. Okay, body line's really good. We got a good parallel here going all the way up. We do lose it right around here. The door kind of tucks in a little more than the quarter panel, and with most cars you're going to have some indiscretions. I'm about 80% positive that these quarters have been replaced. Now, they were replaced with, if they were replaced with full original quarters, because they don't make aftermarket panels for this car. But it could just be an indiscretion on the way the quarter was put on, of why that's not absolutely parallel or flush to each other. But 75% of this lineup is absolutely flush this way. The gap is good this way, and we're not hitting against. I'll have to show you that part of the jam in a minute. We're not hitting the bottom of the jam anymore here in the corner. So that is really makes me happy here. Because the front end on the car, the fenders and the hood and everything, I mean, it was lined up really well. The gaps were nice. And when I took the car apart, I take it off very methodically, that when I start with the bottom of the fender, loosen the fender up and so on, that when I loosen it, the shims fall out. If there are shims in it, I immediately mark those shims together so that when I put this back together, these shims go here, these shims might go in the post, so that when I put the fender back on, it's especially being that it was so nice, that it's going to go right back to where it belongs. But the point I'm trying to make is the shims may change based on the way I've just adjusted the door. Now, because I didn't go as far front as I thought I was going to with this door to the rocker panel here, none of this should be a problem. So I should be able to bolt this fender right back on and bolt this hood right back on and get these gaps perfect again, right where they were. But for now, I'm pretty happy with this door. And I'm going to tighten up all the bolts. I'm going to put the striker post back on, and then we're going to take a quick final look at what we just did. Okay, now, I don't mean to sound like be redundant and like I'm beating a dead horse, but I didn't notice it when I took it off. But behind where the striker post goes, again, it's all rust, no paint. Okay, so painting cars together is fine, but you can't paint it to the point where you have a bare metal car with nothing on it, and now you're putting paint down. You know, if you want to paint things together, at least have the body or the metal epoxy primered or something, and then put things together and then paint over that. But if you're painting on things that have nothing on them, you know, those spots might work for you at the moment, but those are the spots that are going to fail first. So that's just maybe I'm too fussy, but it's a lot of work to do these jobs. That those little and the threads on this are absolute garbage. They're rusty as well. And if I can find my ratchet, I'll put this thing on. But these kind of things kind of frustrate me when I see this kind of work, especially when people pay good money for it. So I'm gonna kind of put the striker where it was and just move it up a fuzz and see where that takes us. All right. Now again, I just put the striker post on, and now I'm going to close the door. So the thing you want to watch is the door going up or down as it hits the post. If it is, striker's in the wrong spot. And it's not I don't know how to say this. If the door is going up or the door is going down, isn't necessarily always the direction you want to move the post. So you just got to figure that part out on your own. But here we moved up just a slight bit and we're in too far. So if we're going up, that means I want to move this down a little bit and out towards the outside of the car. And here again, I mentioned the threads being crusty on this. Well, since the threads are crusty on the striker post or on the jam itself, when I'm trying to adjust the striker, it's fighting me and it's moving the thing all over the place. Clean the threads out, put some grease on them, and when you have to do these little finite adjustments, it just makes it that much easier to do. Okay, now we're flush that way, but we're still a little too high. So I'm just gonna loosen this a little bit. Oh, yeah, went too much. I mean, this is another example where you can also use, I'll use 3/4 tape, and I'll put tape alongside if I have to move it a certain direction this way or that way, and I can kind of see how much I'm moving it if I only have to move it a small little amount. Yeah, that's the way it should close. No resistance at all. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We're nice and flush. Got a nice gap. Let's check it out. Okay, there's our trusty little bottle jack that did all the heavy lifting here. Now if we look at our gap, we get a really nice gap. We did not lose the front edge here where it lines up. Now here's our, again, you see where the tape is now. It moved maybe slightly more than 1/8 of an inch there. Didn't really move at the bottom because as we started with, the door was hanging in the back. So this hinge did the most front to back moving to get the door up where it needed to be. And here again, you can see we're nice and flush to the quarter, but right here at the top, right about here, is where the door is slightly in just a little bit. And again, the other thing to notice is the inside edge of the quarter and the inside edge of the door are exactly the same. So there's some sort of indiscretion here, and I can't exactly explain why, but seeing that this is flush and this is flush on the outside, that's gonna be satisfactory. But as well, here's, like I was saying, you know, in here I moved the hinge and now we got rust behind it. And yeah, that looks like a little spot, but that's gonna be underneath the entire surface of these hinge plates. That's gonna potentially begin the rust. And based on seeing how the door was painted or lack thereof paint, I'm going to only assume that when I pull these hinges off, there's gonna be no paint underneath that. And that's just, in my opinion, is a big no-no. Again, when you're painting, when you're doing a restoration of a car of this magnitude and this value, you don't cut corners, you don't do stuff like that, because it just makes it just isn't worth doing the job. So let's see if I can get the door open. And here's where the door was banging against the jamb here. So that'll be all smoothed out and fixed and looking better. And I don't know if Yeah, underneath the door. Hold on, see if I can show it. It's not much. But right here in this area, it's all worn from hitting the car. It's worn down to the metal. Another issue that the car had was the weather stripping. It's not on now, so it's kind of here nor there. But the weather stripping up in this area, again, because the door was hanging so much, when it would come across, it was actually hitting the weather strip piece that goes in here, and the weather stripping was all eaten away and filed down and just looked like just a wild animal got to it. And that's because the door wasn't aligned correctly. So there's our door. And that was one of the, other than the overall paint job, that was one of the big problems that this customer was having with this car. Okay, so there's our door. And again, like any restoration, now that I have it pretty much exactly where I want it to be, I'll probably be taking it right off again. But we do know that it's in its place and it can be adjusted correctly, and we have nothing really further to do to get this back where it needs to be. So with that, I hope this video was helpful. I hope you all learned something from it. If it helps you with your own project, that's kind of the point of why I'm making these videos. These are the kind of things, in my opinion, that you don't see on your mainstream restoration shows. They're too busy doing burnouts and I don't know, looking at their tattoos. But if you liked this video and you found it helpful, always give that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. All those things really help the channel grow. We've been growing slowly but surely, and we really do appreciate it. So we'll see you in the next video.